Okay, happy birthday, John Soane, 1753, 1837. He was born on September 10th, just like Rudolf Schindler, about whom I'm going to talk after John Soane. So let me read a little bit about him. Sir John Soane was born, as I said, on September 10th, 1753, was an English architect who specialized, I don't know, the word specialized is a little bit restrictive in my opinion. Anyway, this text is from Wikipedia, in the neoclassical style. The son of a bricklayer, he rose to the top of his profession, becoming professor of architecture at the Royal Academy and an official architect to the Office of Works. He received a knighthood in 1831. His best known work was the Bank of England. His work there is largely destroyed, a building which had a widespread effect on commercial architecture. He also designed Dulwich Picture Gallery, which with its top-lit galleries was a major influence on the planning of subsequent art galleries and museums. His main legacy is the eponymous museum in Lincoln's Inn Fields in his former home and office, designed to display the artworks and architectural artifacts that he collected during his lifetime. The museum is described in the Oxford Dictionary of Architecture as one of the most complex, intricate, and ingenious series of interiors ever conceived. So this was the man, born in humble circumstances, but elevating himself to the top of architecture. I think we need examples like him, like his. And, you know, I just had a discussion before I began this presentation with someone here, a student in Bucharest from Iraq. And I told him, to me, this is beyond doubt. If you want to learn literature, you learn best from the best writers. If you want to learn painting, you learn best from nature, of course, but also from the best painters. If you want to learn architecture, it's the same thing. You learn, yes, from nature, but also you learn from the best architects. If you don't know the works of the best architects, there is a good chance that you get lost in the ocean of information and not have valuable guiding marks. Okay, so John Soane, here he is an aristocrat, the son of a bricklaying man. Bravo to him. Some drawings by John Soane. I mean, you know, he did his house for himself, where he, maybe it's understandable, he wanted to have the whole world inside his house and the whole culture and the whole history. And again, I oppose his example to the immense indifference that I encounter in my own time and place. Because I wish students and architects and all those who occupy themselves with architecture have this curiosity that John Soane had. Obviously he had. I mean, he transformed his house into a museum, and indeed, you know, extremely intricate and complex and labyrinthical, and you know, proof of a great love for culture, for art. Anyway, some engravings based on his drawings. Here is a longitudinal section through his house that is now a museum. And it's very interesting that somehow the accessories have the upper hand, in the sense that the collection is the one that somehow dictates the, you know, the atmosphere, the spirit of the place. You know, he didn't leave, you know, empty spots on these walls, almost not at all. Anyway, an interesting man, also a collector. Now, the psychoanalysts have a say, have something to say about collectors. You know, particularly Freudian philosophy, Freudian psychoanalytic theory claims that collectors are anal personalities. There is much to say. And what makes one collect so much, like John Soane did? I think on one hand was a genuine love for art, for history, for time passing, for everything that, in our human fragility, we oppose to, the flowing of time and growing old and perishing. Through art, somehow we imagine we can transgress death, as Julian Schnabel said, but some people think that it's not art which is long and life short, but the other way around. Like the Latins said, ars longa vita brevis, meaning art is long, art is short and life is long. No, art is long and life is short, and Levi-Sud said the opposite, that life is long and art is short. They need each other. I mean, life without art, in my opinion, is almost unbearable to think of. On the other hand, art without life is dead. So you need art and life. You need life and art. You need both. At least this is my position as someone working within the field of art. Anyway, I consider architecture at its best being a special kind of art, but an art. And if we don't recognize this, then we don't recognize the many pages of the many histories of art, which include architecture within them. Letton Hall, 1783, for me, his architecture is not the warmest architecture in the world. Neoclassicism is not the most exuberant form of architecture, but it has its very valuable achievements. And to be sober, even austere, could be a quality. The British have quite a number of, knights in the field of architecture. I mean, truly, I think the higher authorities in British culture, they were generous with architects. There are many sirs. Anyway, it's a formality, but even this formality, maybe it matters to an extent. Now, maybe here we see some influences coming also from Italy, but transformed from Palladio. If I look at the windows here, but this building in itself is still removed from Palladio. But certain influences seem to be seen. Although Palladio was considered by some, just like, for example, Louis Kahn was. I read an essay where Palladio was considered an anti-classic architect. An interesting idea. Anyway, Tendring Hall, 1784, the remaining porch after demolition in 1955. That's the destiny of architecture. Even the pyramids, the Egyptian pyramids, are deteriorating. Sometimes it's easier for a plate, a simple banal plate buried in the earth, to last more than the Egyptian pyramid. It's a paradox, but it's true. Architecture is inevitably confronted with the elements, with all kinds of things, even with bombings, with atomic attacks on them and on life. So we should not be too emphatic about ourselves lasting. Although I forgot who said this, that the architect is someone who almost desperately wants to last. And the paradox is that, you know, the desire for lasting doesn't guarantee that very lasting that the architect wants to achieve. We are very vulnerable, just like everybody else. Rystone Hall, remodeled 1786. But the British, they do a good job at preserving, you know, important works, and bravo to them. Now, this is a photograph of the building, not the building is in this collection. Cricket, St. Thomas House, 1786. He built a lot. This gentleman built a lot. So obviously he was very appreciated, and I appreciate the fact that in a country that you know respects you know tradition and even social hierarchies, someone born in a humble, modest circumstance or circumstances is able to, you know, to ascend towards the higher position in society. And he was not the only one. There are others like Joseph Paxton, the same. So it means there is a level of fairness in the British society. If you do significant work, good work, society appreciates you. It's not everywhere like this, I'm afraid. Sorry about the resolution. You know, his usage of classical elements, constructive elements like the columns is very discreet. So he is not, you know, a historicist, although considering his collection in his own home, you would say that this one was a fanatic historicist, but his buildings have an austerity that is somehow in contradiction with, you know, that, you know, voracious collecting. This is a ruined building, but it's impressive as a ruin as well. I don't know if you know, there is a very interesting architecture school in Taiwan. Maybe the most interesting architecture school in the world is called the Ruin Academy. And please check it out, or you know, if you are curious, on the web. Very interesting school. Where sometimes Wang Shu is invited to teach. So it seems it has a good reputation if someone like him goes there to teach. This, by the way, of ruins. As you know, probably Louis Kahn was very fond of ruins. He said, you know, the ruin is telling us how the building was made. And but it's more than that, you know, it's the romantic quality of a ruin, that it testifies about the passage of time. It's also in a way an imago mundi, you know. The ruin is it's testifying about a common destiny that both humans and buildings have. Anyway, not everybody is fond, I guess, of ruins, but there are beautiful books written by ruins, you know, like The Beauty of Ruins. There is a book, and there are others, or The Pleasure of Ruins. This is a book I had, The Pleasure of Ruins. I like ruins myself, it's true. Maybe also because at least sometimes I feel myself like a ruin, so, you know. No, but ruins, and I think they have great potential, these ruins. I mean, not just in terms of restoring them, but that too, of course. But it's something about them, because it's a lived life. A building that becomes a ruin has a lived life, and thus is a condenser of suggestions, of provocations for the imagination. Is if you love time. And by the way, Vito Acconci, an artist turned architect in New York City, he died 2 or 3 years ago. He said, people think architecture is about space. It is actually about time. And that would be interesting if we could replace the word space with the word time in many discourses on architecture, particularly on modern architecture. Because from what I read, in all the 4 books on architecture by Palladio, he doesn't say one word about space in all those 4 books. The ancients and in the old times, there wasn't this obsession with space as we have today. Today is all about space and the space again. But I think you can have a very accomplished building without this obsession for space. After all, I don't think many of these buildings have such an interesting so-called space. Architecture is more than just space. Tactility, tectonics, ornamentation. I mean, there are many elements in a building that matter. It's not just space. Yellow drawing room. Yeah, well, it's only in part yellow, but it's called the yellow room. It has an interesting, of course, roofing, because it's not a church. It's a secular space. Since I just talked against the word, it's a secular room. It's a secular architecture, but and this is why I think it's interesting, because if you could somehow bring the sacred into the profane or the secular, interesting things could happen. This kind of cupola would have been quite appropriate for a chapel or a church, but not for a domestic space. But if it is done for a domestic space, I think the effect could be refreshing and interesting. Now, of course, this is not the cheapest roofing or ceiling in the world. It's not. It's not for everybody. That's for sure. Not for the proletarians, not for the blue-collar workers. Plunge Pool, 1791, 1793. This is one of the most interesting bathrooms probably ever built. Now, of course, in all kinds of magazines, you can find all kinds of, interesting bathrooms. But this one truly is very ingenious. It's at first you might not even think it's a bathroom. And then look at this, with 2 entrances, 2 stairs, and then this, spiral in a way, this contorted a little bit on the curvy side of things, stair, and then there you have the recipient of water, the basin. It's really a very interesting bathroom. Again, not for the proletarians, not for the blue-collar workers, but for whoever lived here. Although you see the elements and the passage of time don't differentiate between proletarians or blue-collar workers and white-collar workers, or no workers at all, that is the noblemen or aristocrats. Passage of time and the elements strike all of us equally. And this is something we should reflect on. Home farm. Here there is a beautiful wooden work at the roof. I like farms in general. Look at this, I think it's a very nice, again, the forbidden word for me, space. It's a rural work, but the nobility of wood and the clarity of structure, and you know, the triangular spacing at the top creates something interesting. It could be a great art studio or a great whatever, especially connected with art, I feel. Anyway, I'm thinking more and more about a valid rural architecture. And I kind of sympathize with Rem Koolhaas dedicating an exhibition, although it was a rhetorical exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum about 2-3 years ago. That was its theme was rurality, was the rural life. I believe rurality has great potential because we were so concerned with bigness and the city and the metropolitan. I mean, even Rem Koolhaas, as you know, the very name of his office, OMA, Office of Metropolitan Architecture. Well, he turned against himself, talking about the village and rural life. And especially today, when we are confronted with the climate change, with all kinds of issues, I think the village is waiting for us. The rural part of the world is waiting patiently for us to pay some attention to it. And maybe we will, hopefully without being forced by who knows what catastrophe before the Gatehouse. Again, I mean, not again, but you know, in all the times, it was very common to have, you know, gates, ceremonial or not. We don't do them any longer. Maybe because we don't have the idea of locus, of a place, is not with us any longer. We live in a dismembered world. And so when you don't have a place, a locus, then how could you have a gate? Because the gate is a transition between an outside and an inside. And we don't have gates any longer somehow. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Tyringham Hall, another, you know, majestic building, although not very big, but still with its inner majesty. And it seems the animals are not afraid of running in front of it. Symmetry, symmetry, and symmetry again. Bruno Zevi wrote eloquently against symmetry in modern architecture, but symmetry was present in architecture since times immemorial. And if you make a symmetrical building, doesn't mean by definition that it is a static or dead building. No, you could make a symmetrical building which is not static and which is not dead. And I can give countless examples, starting maybe with the Villa Rotonda by Palladio. Bank of England, now this one was almost totally destroyed, and apparently was his most important work. So, you know, more than 200 years ago, he built it. It doesn't exist this any longer, I think. A fragment still exists, but most of it is gone. Now, what can we say? A bank is a bank. In capitalism, the bank is the new church. The bank replaced the church. It's about money. while the church is supposed to be about God. Although, unfortunately, in many parts of the world, the church is still interested in money, and it shouldn't be. I keep remembering the beautiful short poem in prose by Charles Baudelaire, L'étranger, where the poet is asked, do you love gold? And he says, I hate it in as much as you hate God. So, you know, in their raison d'etre and in their function and in their very essence, the bank should be the opposite of a church, and the church should be the opposite of a bank. But unfortunately, there are many church figures, you know, priests and fathers and whatever, who are very interested themselves in money. But if the church is the house of God, then, you know, the bank is the house of money, and they should be dichotomically seen. But, you know, here he tried to, I mean, look at that light, how it is filtered. Now, this is a rendering, but, you know, I wonder, should we have, you know, idealistic thoughts when we enter a bank? When we count our money, you know, maybe it's a perversion of where the sacred light should be. Look at this. It's a city within a city. I mean, it was a city within a city. It was the Bank of England. Let us not forget this. Where the power is because of the money. And we do live in a society and at a time where the concern with money is at its highest. This is what capitalism is about, and we should have we should be very clear about it. To make a profit is considered, not only that it is considered moral, but if you don't make a profit, it's considered immoral by capitalism. Now you tell me, how is it? If you make something that, let's say, costs €4 or $4 or for whatever, why do you charge 7? To me, that is legalized theft, but that's not what capitalism thinks. Anyway, it was probably an interesting building with all those courtyards and, you know, all these various functions and buildings. Quite a large complex of, as I said, a city within a city, a miniature city, yes. Now another, also from the Bank of England, this court, again, only renderings, because most of it, if not all of it, is destroyed. Even the Bank of England, the buildings designed by John Soane were destroyed. So then what can we expect? But when you think about, you know, we look at glorious engravings, we look at glorious buildings, we look at all these things, but in essence, the raison d'etre, the reason to be of this building is money. That's what it is, money. The barn, I like this building, maybe the most of all his works. It is so-called, well, it's not really neoclassic. If I look at it, I almost think, well, this building could be in China. Maybe the columns are a little bit too massive, but it has something oriental. It's very simple, but I love these columns. You know, they are earthy. They are almost voluptuous in their simplicity. It's almost a pre-Doric architecture. It's archetypal. It's almost prior to history, almost, not completely, and it's telluric. It's very powerful, I think. Now, I don't know about this part here made of bricks. This could be a little bit problematic, but Otherwise, the columns I love. And again, it's almost like a temple, a rural temple, but its function is it's a barn. So you know, I like its rurality. I do. John Soane, now a park, Northamptonshire, but it's not a park. It's called park. Park. It's a building actually, maybe placed within a park. I don't know. I mean, what can we say? There are many buildings like this. But what is inside is interesting. He did this kind of museum, not just inside his house, but also here. And look at this. I mean, these are impressive indeed. I mean, this Hercules is with that huge clock hanging from his neck is quite a sight. And here we have the she-wolf with Romulus and Remus, the brothers, and all kinds of things can be found here. Obviously, John Soane was very fond of history, and he tried to bring all of it into some of his interiors, even animals which have nothing to do with history, stuffed animals. Sad, but what can we do? The human curiosity could also take, questionable forms sometimes. And then, yes, we have modern interventions like this sitting area, which I don't know if it's by Zaha Hadid or not, but could have been interesting hybrid interior, but with something said. It's something said about all this collecting. It's something we should maybe one day talk about architecture and collector's mind and the collector's mind. Another, I found this announcement that the contents that we just saw in this building were for sale, an auction. Look at them. They needed cash, so they began to sell some of those wonders inside the building. Gateway at this manor, 1803. It was not just neoclassical. You look at this gateway and it's something else. It has even a certain amount of exoticism. Now we arrive at his house, which is now the museum, Sir John Soane Museum. From the outside, you are not announced that inside is the whole world. And it is. Here it is. I mean, this man obviously, on one hand, made some money, and on the other hand, he spent it. He spent it just like Citizen Kane. I don't know if you saw that movie, which the North American Academy of Films considers it the best North American movie or the best American movie ever, by Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, who also collected a lot. He was a great collector, and he was also very powerful and very rich. So he was able to bring the world to him. Now, John Soane tried in his own way, and you wonder, the house is made for the collections. I mean, the collections are made for the house, or the house is made for the collections. Is some kind of a reversal here, perhaps. He collected everything, books, beauty in essence, and these things, I'm sure they are new, they are modern. Interesting chairs as well. I don't know if he designed them or not. I wonder what he felt, living here. I imagine he lived here, at least for a number of years. I wonder what he felt. Well, this is a form of ornamentation, of course. I mean, he covered the walls with all these acquisitions. They replaced, the old ornaments. This work is highly ornamental because of the collections. A Gothic lodge. And I think with this, I end this presentation. I kind of like this building, although it is a little bit infantile, a little bit gingerbread house, but a Gothicist, I would say, not really Gothic, and maybe a pleasant little house. What else can we say about it? Okay, so happy birthday, John Soane. And now we go to a modern, an architect who, as I said, was very appreciated in New York City when I lived there. And that's when I learned about him. I knew nothing about Rudolf Schindler. And he was an Austrian. He was born in Vienna in 1887 on September 10th. And then he changed his country. He moved to the United States, just like Richard Neutra, both of them Austrians, and both of them developing an important architectural career in the United States on the West Coast, not on the East. So Rudolf Michael Schindler, born Rudolf Michael Schlesinger, born on September 10th, 1887, and he died at 66 on August, almost 66, on August 1953, was an Austrian-born American architect. Whose most important works were built in or near Los Angeles during the early to mid 20th century. Although he worked and trained with some of its foremost practitioners, he often is associated with the fringes of the modern movement in architecture. The word fringe is, it means to the periphery, at the edge. And this is interesting, to maybe we'll dedicate some time to remember architects on the fringes. So not those at the center of the architectonic culture, but at the periphery. His inventive use of complex three-dimensional forms, warm materials, and striking colors, as well as his ability to work successfully within tight budgets, however, have placed him as one of the true mavericks of early 20th century architecture. Rainer Bernham said he designed as if there had never been houses before. Well, I think this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but to those of you who do not quite know the meaning of the word maverick, and myself, I was wondering exactly what its meaning is. Well, I guess it means something like a motherless calf. A motherless calf is, a maverick is someone who is, again, has interesting things, has the ability to attract attention, but it's also something unpredictable about him or her, is, a little bit an enigma, as Kenneth Frampton would say. He described Kenneth Frampton, Adolf Loos being an enigma, and also Wang Shu. Now, I'm not trying to say that Wang Shu and Adolf Loos were or are mavericks, but anyway, the word maverick is used with a sense of admiration but not only, also with puzzlement, as if you are, yes, you are attracted by the maverick, but you don't quite understand the maverick completely. Anyway, this was the man. So born in Vienna, and after he studied architecture in Vienna, he went to the States. He worked even for Frank Lloyd Wright, together with Richard Neutra, and they became even competitors, both Austrians, but highly successful on the west coast of the United States. And looking at his pictures, I would say he was a man of some intensity and probably confronted, at least from time to time, with the dark forces of the soul, perhaps. Some drawings are very beautiful, and you feel a certain influence of Frank Lloyd Wright, but his architecture was not imbued with that pantheist organicism Frank Lloyd Wright had. It's rather an urban architecture. You see this building. Now, I'm not commenting on these flamboyant waves, but the building has also a European somehow character. Somehow, it's not typical a typical North American building. And yes, it is modern. Yes, the buildings often benefit from a spectacular landscape they situate themselves in, but they are very different from the buildings by Frank Lloyd Wright. But there is something, I think, not in everything, like Frank Lloyd Wright would have never done these things here, which I don't even know what they are. They are approximations of trees or something. But otherwise, even in the way of writing here at the bottom, and even this, logo, whatever it is, there is something of Wright, and maybe more in this rendering, which is also interesting because just like Frank Lloyd Wright, who always are very often, if not always, he arrests the drawings at the top part of at its top part and leaves much more space at the bottom where the earth is. Something similar is here in this drawing. He drew well, yes, and his renderings done manually, of course, I think they are proofs of his talent. I particularly like this rendering of this building. Frank Lloyd Wright didn't really love the city. I mean, he loved maybe Broadacre City, which was not really a city. It was his project, visionary project. But he was not a man of the city. He always lived outside, at Taliesin East and Taliesin West. But Schindler is a man of the city. And his architecture, even when the buildings that he built are in so-called in nature, placed in a natural landscape, they have some, I would call it an urban quality. He built a lot, especially private houses. So the Schindler House, this is something is his best building. Built for himself in 1922 in West Hollywood in California. And it is indeed a very fine building where you can see some influence coming from the East, from the Orient, from Japan. It's a skillfully done building. it's not flamboyant, it's simple in its aesthetics, but it doesn't have an arresting austerity. It is simple, but not, I wouldn't call it austere. And the glazed parts, by the way of the glazed part, meaning the windows, the glass. I just read today an interesting article on Arch Daily, where builders, accomplished builders of skyscrapers from important architectural firms, they all declare that the skyscraper, as we knew it, with a lot of glass, is to perish because of many things, concerns with energy loss, climate change, and I welcome this, because two of them on Arch Daily, you can read this article. Two of them even said that the most interesting buildings in Manhattan are the skyscrapers built 100 years ago, which didn't have curtain walls, didn't have so much glass. And so much glass means a great chance to lose a lot of energy. That's what a lot of glass means. You need a lot of pumping mechanically, artificially, of air, and glass is responsible for a great loss of energy. But those buildings built 100 years ago in Manhattan had small windows, and they had masonry. They had, so there is a return, it seems, at least, as desiderata. There is a concern with a new kind, towards a new kind of skyscraper, which has less glass. I think this is a positive thing. It will happen, if it will happen indeed. Now, in the case of Schindler, there are also walls. It's not just everything rarefied, but he has surfaces of glass. But I like the fact that he divides them. It's not just, he could have used maybe even at that time, I don't know, maybe even a big one pane of glass, but he divided it. And I think this division of the glass is a positive thing. Of course, you have the same amount of loss of energy, but he was not concerned at that time in 1922 with the loss of energy. But aesthetically, I think glass done in this way is less arrogantly demagogical, because glass is demagogical, as Andrea Kahn well put it in a nice book written by 10 women architects from the United States, published by Princeton. So we have glass, but we also have almost massive walls. But the whole house, I think, has a certain level of hybridity. But I know it's almost oxymoronic what I'm saying. A simple hybridity. There is complexity, but there is also simplicity, and I think it's an excellent building. Some say, as I said, as I read, is his best building. Now I don't know what is there now. I don't know if it is inhabited. He also designed a lot of furniture, and we are going to end our presentation with pieces of furniture that he designed. It's not a very small house, but I understood he lived some time here together, well, with his wife, but also Richard Neutra and his wife live here, because there was also an office. Maybe this part of the building was an office. So two families lived in this house at one point, Schindler and his wife, and Neutra and his wife. Interesting. And you see, it's a building that it's geometrical, it's rational, but also has an articulation of the volumes that could refer to some kind of a geometrical or geometrized, if there is such a word, organism. I could call it perhaps adventurously Euclidean organism or organicity. Well, you also see that I think the influence coming from the East, from Japan, is an excellent building. It is. This chair was also done by him. I recognize it because of its rather peculiar backing here. If you don't have this softer material here, this thing could be quite uncomfortable. Yeah, this was designed by Schindler, and so this one, and probably all of these pieces, this one for sure, and this one. Global Beach House. This is also a well-known building by him from 1922, 1926. Quite a dramatic space underneath the second floor, or even the third floor, perhaps we could call it. You would almost, if you didn't see what is here, you would say, well, this is a public building. Well, it's not a public building. It's a private building. So Schindler, built in a certain way on the West Coast, and I would say that this so-called certain way is connected with Europe, with a certain European sensitivity. I would say his architecture didn't become fully North American. And that's why perhaps it was so appreciated on the East Coast in New York, because New York is fascinated by Europe. I lived for many years in New York, and I can tell you, I very rarely, if at all, I've heard the schools of architecture or lectures or wherever I went, people talking about Frank Lloyd Wright or Sullivan or Richardson. No, they only talked about European architecture. In this sense, perhaps it can be understood why Rudolf Schindler was so admired in the 90s in New York City. I like the way he could have had here just a horizontal window, straight from one corner to the other. He divides it in small segments, and you almost have a kind of like a small artwork by Mondrian in just this part of this series of windows. Here also, the window. So the window is designed also in a certain way. It's not just put a piece of glass there and leave. It's not like this. Interesting that he uses two stairs, but you can see in the elevation, they are not symmetrical, and they don't have the same sloping angle. I hope I have a picture here. No, just a second. Should have one. Yeah, you see here. So there are two stairs, one with a different angle, I mean, more abrupt angle, and one, so, you wonder why he made them in this way. Otherwise, the building is symmetrical here, but he betrayed that symmetry through these stairs. Interesting, an interesting idea. Why should we all make the stairs with the same dimensions, the treads and the risers? Why? Just because of comfort or efficiency in working, or no, I think doing this, he assumed the subjectivity of walking. Walking is not the same for everybody, and not the same even for the same person at different times or different moods, and who knows. So the
Then
subject,
the
hello?
second could be a ramp, I guess.
It's not a ramp. For
Because
a ramp is to now, it cannot be a ramp because the angle is too big for a ramp. Plus you see it in the drawing. This is not a ramp.
right. Okay.
Interesting. Anyway, now these drawings are not done, were not done by him. These are recent drawings, somebody did them anyway. The west elevation, south elevation, global house, Rudolf Schindler. Now, yes, you could say, was this drama here justified? Well, you know, we cannot justify everything in terms of reason. So I think architecture is a realm where a certain level of capriciousness, if we are to call it so, is present. You know, not every gesture in architecture can be explained rationally. And I think this is a good thing, actually. It's a comfortable house, you know, and interesting. You know, it's even this interior balcony and double height living room, and you know, some things were of course employed by Le Corbusier and others, but he does it here with skill and certain emphasis on the clarity of certain decisions. 1923, El Puebla, Ribera Court, La Jolla, California, where the great building by Louis Kahn is. So these are houses. He built mainly houses. We are going to see a church. I don't know if we are going to see something else besides houses. So Schindler again in La Jolla, California. The Jonas Salk Institute by Louis Kahn is here, and that is yes, a significant work in the body of works by Louis Kahn. So now we see a building. In fact, there are several by Schindler. He built like this. He like small colonies or groupings of either apartments or you know, private houses, a cluster of 6 buildings or like this. Again, this I think it's rather European, this idea to fight off excessive individualism by grouping together a few either apartments or small houses. We are going to see this a few times in the work of Schindler. We are going to see also pictures of a bathroom, which has a certain almost unexpected complexity, not like the bathroom designed by John Soane, but still. You see, there are here 5 houses, similar in character and architectural expression, all with a courtyard or 2. And they have this, I like this fact that they are individualized, but they are also together. There is a sense of community between these 6 houses, actually. You know, they are together, and yet separated at the same time. So he achieved what I think is very difficult to achieve, but very important: multiplicity in unity. Designed by him, the piece of furniture. And this is the bathroom. So today we looked at two different bathrooms, one from more than 200 years ago, and one from, I don't know, 70 years ago, 90 years ago. The fixtures show that this is not a contemporary bathroom, but look at the complexity, of the, there is a skylight, there are these two other windows. I don't know very well if wood is very happy to be confronted with the humidity normally at times present in a bathroom, but he used a lot of wood there. He also uses the wood in other parts, like in this the bedroom, also with a nice skylight above the bed. Otherwise, the architectural language of the house is, almost minimalist, almost. How house for James, interesting, house for James adds how. That's the name, the family name, how, interesting. The owner of the house, Mr. Howe, Silver Lake, Los Angeles. So it was built in 1925, almost 100 years ago. Again, the window that refuses to be as we would do it today, and I think this kind of fragmenting the window has some virtues. Some drama on the ceiling, more than on the floor. Well, that might be because no one works on the ceiling, but everybody works on the floor. So I'm sure, I hope this rug was not approved by him anyway. Built-in furniture, he designed all these pieces of furniture, and we are going to see others. Even in the field of furniture, he was different from Frank Lloyd Wright, who also designed furniture. I like what he does with the ceiling. He studied the ceiling. The ceiling is not just a flat slab. No, it's more. Manola Court apartment building, another apartment building, and the same kind, where he brings together various apartments and creates this unity between them without losing the individuality of each unit. This is again a quality of his work, and something worth doing ourselves. Where you have this variety in unity. So you have a feeling that this house is yours, it's private, it's yours, but it is coupled with the others. And you create this, as I called it, multiplicity in unity, which I think is a positive thing. How, the apartments were modified in terms of the furnishings and so on. This is a rather contemporary arrangement within the room itself, but the architecture remained the same. Quite a luminous house. the Wolf's House, Avalon, 1928. This is just that drawing, which I said I admired, and I continue to admire it. I think it's one of the best renderings by Rudolf Schindler. And here it is built. Yeah, very similar, but it might be that it was destroyed. And if it was, it's a shame. An interesting building on a dramatic sloping piece of land, but I would say a good building. Why would it be destroyed? These are all the pictures. I think it was destroyed. I think it was demolished. 1928, 1952, it took a long time, 24 years. 2 guest apartments and furniture for the Samuel Freeman House in Hollywood Heights, but no pictures. 1930, the Elliott House, so Los Angeles. As you can see, he benefited from dramatic landscapes, but his architecture is not submissive to the landscape, nor does it try to dwarf the landscape. It's kind of a balance between man and nature. Man asserting himself, or the human being asserting itself through geometry, through these specifically human functions. Rudolf Schindler, now 1933, Oliver House, Los Angeles. I understood that Schindler had a conflict with Wright. Wright actually, he worked for Wright for a number of years, and when Frank Lloyd Wright was in Japan building the Imperial Hotel, he chose Rudolf Schindler to run his office in the States, and Schindler did, but I don't know exactly what happened. Later on, Schindler complained that he wasn't paid sufficiently, and that he was rather abused. And anyway, it was a conflict. At one moment, they broke apart, Frank Lloyd Wright and Rudolf Schindler. This is why I keep saying it matters a lot with whom you work, in what office you work, what you study, whose work inspires you. If you don't have the chance to work with a great architect, have at least a chance, or use the chance to learn about the works of the important architects, because again, you learn from them. If you ignore them, you ignore those who gave themselves totally to the art of architecture. And why go for lesser examples or mentors when you can go to the best? And the luck today is that you have access on the internet practically to anything, but there is so much information on the web that if you don't have some guiding marks, you can get lost. And I'm thinking of the students, those very students who ignore my presentations. What can I say? They will arrive later on at the conclusion that they are lost. Well, they are lost because they ignore the examples of, John Soane, Schindler, Cedric Price, Neutra, and all the others who meant something in architecture. The Rainbow Ballroom, no pictures, another house. This is a large house it's a city of Los Angeles, historic cultural monument chosen. Yes, a modern monument, sure. It's a good thing that they offer this status to important modern buildings, because modernity is part of culture in general and history as well. we shouldn't say, well, it's modern, we shouldn't protect it, it's not part of the, you know, cultural heritage. It's not so. It's not a bad building at all. Although here the windows are a little bit emancipated, so to speak. I like more his earlier treatment of windows. Here is beginning to get rid of mullions, and I don't know. Anyway. Another house, 1934. This one different because he built in the mountains, and this is the only building like this that I know of with this kind of sloping roof, you know, astute angle there at the top. It's a mountain hut in a way. It seems it is an equilateral triangle in section, cross section. I'm thinking about the triangle, you know, why we deprived the world of all mysteries, you know. For us, a triangle doesn't have any mystical connotations, but I'm thinking about the old Egyptians who treated, I forgot exactly how it was called, the golden triangle or the perfect triangle, the right triangle, I mean, with a 90 degrees angle, where the hypotenuse is, was the son or the daughter, the child, the one, I forgot now the words in English. So the three sides of the triangle, those two sides that intersected or met at the right corner or the right angle were called the mother, the father, and the son, with the sides, with the dimensions 3, 4, and 5. Is the only triangle where, you know, you have these numbers 3, 4, and 5. The 3 symbolizing the mother, the 4 symbolizing the father, and the 5 symbolizing the child. And it's, again, we might laugh, we might say this is a naivete, you know, but I think the way we use numbers today, and not just triangles, is so deprived of all mystery, of all imagination, of all even culture. For us, they are just numbers, you know, numbers. They have nothing to transcend the factuality. And I think it's a great loss. I imagine that Schindler here, working with the equilateral triangle, had some idealism in him. You know, he could have used any kind of triangle. But it seems it's an equilateral triangle. And it's an idealistic triangle, if I can call it so. A duplex in Hollywood, 1935. We know by now his architectural language. Yeah, he built a lot, but not all houses are identical. I mean, they are similar. We are going to see a few other houses which are different from the ones we already saw. But we see already that he loves wood. We see this incorporated furniture, built-in furniture. We see the ceiling covered in wood. In some, you know, some parts of Europe and you know, of history. I'm not so convinced about the way he treats the you know, the working areas. You know, I don't know. Maybe this was changed, but somehow I wish there was wood here too, or something. You know, this one has a mundane character, which is somehow in contradiction with what I see at the top and even on the sides. Anyway, easy to you know, question and criticize. It's more difficult to do. 1937, another house in Los Angeles. Again, Rudolf Schindler with his European sensibilities brought on the west coast of the United States. Another complex of apartments, 1938, but no picture, City of Los Angeles historic. No, I think I do have pictures, sorry. I remember, I like this work for the same reason I like the others, because it is a cluster of apartments. When you look at it from the street, you don't know very well. Is it a large house? Is it a conglomerate? Is it a sum of smaller apartments? What is it? It's exactly because he achieved that verity in unity. And I like the fact that he bisects the building. And so there is this rift, this schism, and this creates some tension, and I think it's good architecture. Nothing maybe very spectacular, not flamboyant, but I think it's an architecture that has no reasons to be ashamed of itself. And inside also, there is a certain level of verity. There are these, shelves and these steps. There is a little bit of movement here within the apartment. At the top, you see his drawing for this complex of apartments. Rudolf Schindler. Wilson House. Also City of Los Angeles Historic Cultural Monument, 1938. Another, is called apartments. But when you look at it, you say this is a villa. I don't know. Are there several apartments here? It's possible. Another house, 1940, he really designed many. Now this one is different from the others because of the material he employed on the roofing and also the configuration of the roofing. Probably some things had been changed in time. It's possible. He also employed stone when he felt like it. It's not a pure architecture, his architecture has the so-called impurities of life. And the materials, he is not inhibited or inhibiting with a restricted palette of or repertoire of materials. No. Some I object to. Yes.
Then the inside reminds you of Tellison West. If you go back 2 slides. Yes, this one. Frank Lloyd Wright Studio, Tellison West. Hello.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Maybe to an extent. Yes, there is something. It's true. Not the flooring. I think the flooring somehow is, I don't know why. I think the flooring is rather banal, but on the other hand, what can you do about the flooring to make it not banal? Well, Frank Lloyd Wright used sometimes stone, like the Falling Water building. He used stones from the place where he built the house and incorporated them. They are part of the building inside. So anyway, you cannot ask this to be done by many people, to bring stones, as part of the living room, to work on them actually. Another house from 1940. I do think that somehow the flooring is a little bit problematic for me in his buildings. They are not, I don't know, I could have used more imaginative type of flooring, probably. Another house, he built too many. Maybe I should not have included so many. They could be a little bit tiring because they are similar. But it's also possible that I imagine the flooring was changed. It's not what he designed. I mean, these houses are almost 90, 100 years old. Now this church, which I showed because I talked about Schindler a while ago, and I don't know if Abdullah is still here. He probably is, because he wants to educate himself, and he does well in this sense. This church, personally, I like, although people would say that this doesn't look like a church, but I like. I like its modesty. I like that it doesn't try to impose on the others what its function is. And I don't think it totally neglects a certain symbolism and a certain manipulation of space according to what a church is. Maybe initially a church was just this, some kind of a gathering place where people who believed in the same God gathered, and at the very beginning, at least in Christianity, they stood in circle. This was changed in time, but I think it was something very valuable about that idea to bring people together. Maybe ideally in a circle. What is interesting here, in my opinion, is that you enter the church through the corner of the building. You see there are two doors here. I don't know if they both go outside. So the entrance is diagonally through the corner of the building. And maybe the most interesting part architecturally is exactly here, the entrance with this skylight, where you see the cross. But you see the cross rotated, because as you enter, of course, you enter not explicitly diagonally, but this is the diagonal within the space, and we are going to see it. Just a second. I hope yeah. You see it here. It's an interesting configuration, because the building is Cartesian, but the movement within this larger space, the church per se, so to speak, is diagonal. So you enter, in my opinion, this I'm sorry, this implicit diagonal is a reference to the otherness of God. Some people might object, but I think that what we call the divine is the other par excellence, and in a very discreet way. Maybe I'm speculating here in a way which might not have received the approval of Rudolf Schindler. It's possible, but when you look at this building, you wouldn't expect that kind of diagonal movement within. It's a perfectly Cartesian building. There are no diagonals here in plan. But within the Cartesian framework, he suggested the diagonal movement, and I think this is interesting. The only, so-called, architectonic connection with the function of the building perhaps is here at the top. Some kind of a, even here you see, it's some kind of a cross, but a cross divided in two parts that are perpendicular on each other. So it's not the bidimensional cross, if I can call it so, in one plane. Is on two, perpendicular on each other. This is, I think, an invention, an interesting one, and it connects with the entrance into the building. Because the entrance into the building, I think, in this building is important. You see the space, it's Cartesian. It is only here that it is suggested the diagonal of movement. And to me, this is interesting. Otherwise, I guess this was probably built in a poor area of Los Angeles. You can see there are graffitis. There is that man there who, the building was probably abandoned. But in its simplicity and modesty, I kind of like. Well, there is also the diagonal here, which I didn't see in the pictures I have. And I don't know why I don't have pictures with this part. But otherwise, yes.
If you go back 2 or 3 slides where you are showing the building, the cross. This one. If you see the bottom, the 2 beams, they are at a different level. He could have made these 2 at the same level, but I think he suggested stacking of these horizontal bands. You get what I mean? The base of the building, the 2 beams are at different levels. It's not the same level. The building above, all the beams are at same level. I mean the horizontal bands.
Well, they are not. Here is the same thing. This is above the other.
Yeah, but at the bottom he could have done those 2 bands together, the left and the right on the bottom. They are stacked above each other. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
No, you are very clear, but I don't understand what you want to say.
He could have done these at the same level, but he's done this probably to give some effect. The left and the right wing, the beams, they could have been at the same level, like it's above. If you see the left and the right wing, the bands are at the same level with these window strip in the middle. I think this is some kind of architectural some element. I don't know how to express it, but this I feel is this needs some explanation why he did this.
Well, I don't know where this door goes. Why he has a different height here than here. I don't know, but it's true. Again, we cannot explain everything rationally. It's his conception about what a building is and the dynamics of stacking a certain entity, architectural entity, on top of another one, create some, I don't know, I guess, the dynamics of his buildings. I don't know what's all, but yes, of course, it could have been the same level, or this one could have been above, of course.
Right, Dan. Thanks.
Thank you. And so, but I'm intrigued by the interior, because it's this fact that it's a Cartesian room, it's a rectangular room, yes, in L, but you see how slightly suggested is here. It's not this implicit diagonal intrigues me, and he does it with a Cartesian building, with a building that is Euclidean, if I can say so. I think this is very interesting, and you see it here, the way the chairs are positioned. Clearly there are 2 vectors, this one and this one. You wouldn't expect this diagonal here, and this diagonal connects, but also is not expressed. Here at the top, we have the same coordinates, this one and this one, which is the cross, but you work diagonally. So the cross above you is rotated. So this seems to suggest, I don't know, I'm speculating now, maybe wrongly, but it seems to suggest in my imagination that Schindler thought that the work of man, that the positioning of man in the world is somehow not according to the coordinates of God, that we are somehow off. This diagonal seems to me to, this diagonal, which is only very discreetly suggested, seems to say to me, again, I speculated ad hoc. I like this building, and again, the only, if this part was not here, this could have been a house, a larger house, a little bit, but a house. But with this thing at the top, it becomes something else. And it's abstracted. This is what I like. It is abstracted. And it depends where you see it from, but there is a good chance. I mean, I imagine this is in plan, it's a cross, and you see it from different angles, and you see like a divided cross. It's because it has two planes. It's a folded cross. Interesting. Anyway, I improvise now, but I think it's worth investigating a little bit this building. Because it's very subdued, very rarely. In fact, I never saw a church where the cross is so subtly represented, like here. This is clearly divined from the cross, but it's very abstracted and very subdued. At first, you might not realize that it is about a cross. Interesting work, I think. And you see here now, here, yes, in this corner, you see the diagonal, and the diagonal is different from here. You see another cross on the ceiling, which is diagonal. So the insinuation of the cross within the crystallization of the building, in my opinion, is rather subtle and discreet. I kind of like this building, and I feel encouraged to reflect more on it and think about it, because I find it interesting, you know, because there is a tension between the secular and the sacred. The sacred is present, but not in an oppressive way, and there seems to be some kind of a disjunction between man and God. This somehow I feel tempted to say. Usually the light is placed near the altar, but here is not. The light from above is at the entrance into the building. So it is as if the architect said, when you enter the building, at that moment, you receive the light from God. You enter the house of God. He says it perhaps in this way, because usually this kind of light from above is above the altar, so the opposite to the entrance, not here, but he does it at the entrance. Interesting. Other apartments, we already know kind of how he works, you know, bringing together a few apartments, 6 or 4 or 6, 8, a small number, a cluster. But what is interesting here, he doesn't place the buildings perpendicular on this path, but at a certain angle. You'll see in the plan. So it's a dynamic configuration. Otherwise, the architecture of the buildings is similar to what we already saw. And you see here that they are at a certain angle, these units, these apartments, as they are called. And I think this narrow, it's not really a street, this, almost a sidewalk in between the buildings is important. This is the interstitial space between these two rows of buildings. This is the place of gathering where you meet your neighbors, where you could say hello to someone in the balcony or at the window. This space is important, I think, this interstitial space. And you see in the plan, sorry about the resolution, you see that the houses are not perpendicular on the, on this interior street, or how to call it. Also, he is not afraid to have a rather short distance between one building and the other. So, the buildings, at least in this area, are very close. I don't know, this is a few meters between them. Another house. I like this house. This is one of my preferred houses by Schindler. It's a little bit different from the others. He plays here with some diagonals too. And I don't know, I like this facade of the building. I don't know exactly what it may, maybe that room at the top is the room of the artist or the dreamer, the philosopher, or whatever. Well, you could have protested. You could have said, come on, that's the room of Homo economicus, not the artist, not the dreamer, not the philosopher. But I still like to think that, such a room is destined for someone who is either a poet or a dreamer or a philosopher or an artist or a prophet, would maybe Nietzsche add. Anyway, an interesting house. And the top, I mean, this room is also interesting. I'm not sure about the color of, maybe it was repainted or I don't know. It's something here that is a little bit different from what we saw outside. Also the glass, could it be that it was like this bluish? In these pictures, it doesn't seem to be inhabited, the house. Anyway, this is from the other side. Schlesinger House, 1952, also in Los Angeles. I continue to think that the ceilings are superior, architecturally speaking, to the floorings. The Legner House. This is also an interesting house because of this rather monumental touch within the domestic context. I still prefer those fragmented windows from the beginning that we saw, this large piece of glass is kind of without character, I think. although even Luis Barragan employed large pieces of glass sometimes. But look at the drawing, skillful drawing, again with a maximized earth and minimized sky, just like Frank Lloyd Wright used to do. It must be very pleasant to take a bath in this bathtub here with, with so much natural light and two windows. Anyway. Furniture design, and with this I end the presentation on Rudolf Schindler. As I said, he designed many pieces of furniture, some more spectacular than others, almost all of them uncomfortable, I would say. I don't know, I mean, maybe not all of them, but some of them at least. Anyway, particularly this chair, which I like aesthetically, cubicle, but think about having this on your back. If you don't place something else on it, it's almost unbearable, to have your back tortured by this piece of wood here. It is clear he ignored certain requirements of, comfort. He was not Hans Wagner, the king of chairs, that's for sure. This one also is interesting because you see, you can lift it, you can move it, but it's, it's not a chair on which you would stay for hours reading leisurely your newspaper. No, it's a nice little piece of furniture, but not for a long time to be used. Now, yes, with this thing here, it's acceptable, that chair, but without it, I would say no. Anyway, he liked it. He did many variations. This is another, kind of awkward chair, a little bit awkward. It has something of Frank Lloyd Wright's furniture, a little bit. Desk, almost good for the computer age. Although, I don't know, I mean, I guess, if you didn't like to extend your knees and your legs too much underneath, it would have been okay. But if you didn't, this piece here certainly would have been rather uncomfortable for your knees. Very easy to hurt yourself, I think, with this piece here. Anyway, not that I am a functionalist, but certain things, as you can see, a good architect took some poetical licenses when he did certain things, not just architecturally, but also in terms of furniture. Again, an architect is a lot also about form. These are cubes. They're abstract. They are interesting perhaps for the eye, but if you sit on these things for too long, you might miss a less interesting chair aesthetically, but more comfortable, like this one, which is a little bit burlesque, but more comfortable. What can we do? That's it. So happy birthday to Rudolf Schindler, and thank you for being here today.